I've always believed people show you who they are long before they explain who they are. I just didn't want to believe it when it came to Lena Brooks. Maybe it was the way she laughed when she wanted something, or the way she never said thank you unless someone else was watching. Maybe I ignored the warning signs because I thought love meant patience, or because I was lonely in ways I didn't want to admit. But whatever the reason, I let her move into my cabin in northern Colorado with nothing more than a suitcase and a promise that it would be temporary, stretched into almost a year. And I kept making room for her, rearranging both my furniture and my expectations, until I barely recognized the life I'd built before she showed up. The day everything snapped was my brother's annual end-of-summer barbecue. I had spent the morning helping him set up, hauling folding tables and arranging coolers full of beer and soda. Lena arrived 2 hours late with her friends, Ivory and Kiki, who documented every step as if the ground itself needed their approval. The three of them moved through the ranch like tourists on safari, laughing at things that weren't funny, flirting with strangers, posing in front of horses they didn't want to touch. I had learned to tune out most of Lena's theatrics, but that day I wasn't prepared for how quickly she could turn me into a prop. I walked over just to ask if she was heading back with me that night. I needed to know whether to prep the delivery truck for the morning. It wasn't controlling, it was planning. I said, "Are you coming home with me after this?" Nothing more, nothing less. She didn't even stop recording. She just tilted her sunglasses down and said loudly, "Ethan, relax. You don't run my schedule. You're not my husband. Seriously, chill." Ivory burst into laughter. Kiki snorted. Someone behind me murmured, "Damn." And I stood there, holding a plate of ribs, feeling like I'd been slapped in public. I remember nodding once and saying, "Right, got it." But inside my chest, something unlatched. Not anger, not heartbreak, just clarity. The kind that's been waiting too long. She left the barbecue with her friends, of course, not bothering to ask if I needed help cleaning up. When I got home that night, I sat in my workshop with the lights off, letting the darkness settle into my bones. I kept hearing her voice in my head, bright and sharp, like shattered glass. "You're not my husband. Chill." I should have been furious. Instead, I felt strangely calm, almost surgical, like something had clicked into place. The next morning, she left for a 3-day collaboration retreat with some skincare company. She didn't wake me to say goodbye. She didn't leave a note explaining where she was staying. The only thing she left behind was a mountain of shipping boxes from her PR packages, stacked by the door, along with a handwritten note telling me to break them down because she didn't have time. That note did something to me. It wasn't the contents. It was the handwriting. Loopy, careless, rushed, like she wrote it on her way out to something more important. And for the first time, I asked myself, important to who? I lifted the first box and felt a weight inside me tip. Then I began. I started packing her things quietly, without drama, without anger. I put on an old record, the kind she always complained was too dusty sounding, and let it play while I worked. Her clothes went into labeled boxes. Her makeup went into bubble wrap. Her ring lights, her cameras, her props, her wigs, all of it sorted like I was organizing a museum exhibit of someone I no longer knew. I didn't rush. I didn't throw anything. I didn't break anything. I treated her belongings with more care than she'd ever shown the cabin. By the time the sun set, 10 boxes were stacked against the wall. 10. And I still wasn't done. The next morning, I loaded everything into my truck and drove it to a climate-controlled storage facility 20 minutes away. I paid the full monthly rate in advance. I even signed her name on the access form so there'd be no confusion about ownership. I raised my hand to the clerk as I left, feeling lighter than I had in months. When I got back, I didn't stop at reclaiming space. I rebuilt it. I tore out the flimsy rack she used as a closet and replaced it with walnut shelves. I sanded down the bed frame, stained it, and carved a small mountain range into the headboard. I cleaned the kitchen until it gleamed like a photograph. And when I stood in the center of the cabin on the second night, listening to the fire crackle, I felt something dangerous but sacred. I liked being alone. The third day, something strange happened. I drove into town for hardware supplies, and on my way back, I passed the rescue center. A sign read, "Older dogs half price." I don't know why I pulled in. I don't know why I walked inside. Maybe loneliness.
I told them about your background so they could be prepared. Prepared? He said it like I was the embarrassment. Like I was the inconvenience. Prepared for someone who grew up with bills instead of bank accounts. Prepared for someone who worked instead of inherited. The humiliation was a slow burn. But revenge was a cold calculation. For the next 2 days, I watched them. Their arrogance, the way they sat with their legs crossed just so. The way they talked like the world owed them respect simply because they existed. People like them think humiliation only travels downward, never up. Daniel had bought a very expensive bottle of tequila for their final night, the kind he bragged about, the kind he thought would impress them. The afternoon before the farewell dinner, they went on a long hike. I said I wasn't feeling well and stayed behind. The moment the front door closed, the house felt different. Quieter. Ready. I took out my phone, hit record, placed it on the counter. Then I lifted the fancy bottle, heavy, pale glass, gold label, and loosened the seal. I poured it into the sink. Every drop. Then I replaced it with cheap Sauza gold. A harsh, unrefined burn in a pretty bottle. As I poured, I spoke into the camera. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't sound angry. I talked about my childhood. About sharing blankets in winter. About laughing with my siblings even when life was grim. About how love mattered more than money. I said how grateful I was not to grow into the kind of people who used insults as entertainment. How privilege without empathy was just greed wearing a mask. How arrogance rotted a soul long before poverty ever could. Then I poured myself shots from the real tequila before replacing everything. Warmth bloomed in my chest. Not drunkenness. Validation. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next day, the performance began. They poured the cheap tequila into crystal glasses like it was liquid gold. Fiona swirled it dramatically. Chase sniffed it like a sommelier. Daniel looked proud, chest puffed, like he had handcrafted the bottle himself. Fiona sipped and sighed. You can taste the quality. Chase nodded. Smooth. Very smooth. Daniel beamed. I sat in silence, watching the irony unfold. Watching them praise bitterness disguised as luxury. Finally, when the moment felt right, I stood. Walked to the TV. Connected my phone. I made something for you, I said. Just a little thank you. The room shifted the moment the video started. Their faces changed slowly, at first confusion, discomfort, then suddenly, sharply. Realization hit them like a slap. They watched me pour out the real liquor. Watched me replace it with cheap tequila. Watched me speak about my childhood with quiet fury. Watched me call them exactly what they were. Then the video ended. Silence. Heavy. Embarrassed. Dead. I collected the shot glasses. Turned. Left the room without a word. That night, Daniel stormed into the bedroom, furious. My sister is crying. You humiliated us. I looked at him calmly. Yeah, I said. Sucks, doesn't it? He slept elsewhere. I slept peacefully. They left the next morning. No goodbyes. No hugs. Just fast, angry footsteps and a slammed door. Fiona never spoke to me again. Not a text. Not a message. Not a single word. Even months later, when we visited his parents overseas, she refused to come see us. Hiding behind shame is easier than facing truth. Eventually, I left Daniel too. The divorce papers felt like opening a window in a suffocating room. For the first time in years, I breathed freely. That tequila night wasn't just revenge. It was clarity. It was the moment I remembered who I was and who I refused to become. I grew up poor, but I grew up human. They grew up rich. But they grew up hollow. Walking away from that family wasn't just easy, it was necessary. And if life taught me anything, it's this. Money buys comfort. Money buys convenience. Money buys silence. But money will never buy character. Never buy empathy. Never buy the humanity they desperately lacked. I may have walked into their world quietly, but I walked out loudly, and with my dignity intact.